Hello there, I hope you're doing well. And today we are going to look at part two of the Unit 8, which is inversions of the dominant seventh chord. What I'm going to do is share my screen and we'll speak a little bit about how to approach the dominant seventh chord inversions while using two important chords. We are going to use the subdominant chord, also known as chord 4, and then we are also going to use the chord 2, which is the supertonic chord. Now in both iterations here, both of these, as we know, are precadential chords, which means that these chords occur right prior to a cadence, hence the name. Now, something that's very interesting is now that we've been speaking about inversions of chords, not only just with inversions of the dominant seventh chord, of which we are speaking on today in more detail, but also in a previous video we spoke on the inversions of chords and how they work. Something that's very interesting is that we can use smooth voice leading in the bass and also in the other voices when using inversions of a chord, going into or moving towards the inversions of the dominant seventh chord. But it's very important to also recognize that when we are using inversions of the dominant seventh chord, the best practice is to make sure that we have a root, a third, a fifth, and a seventh in the dominant seventh chord that we are using. The reason for this is because when we have the root in the bass, or the lowest note in which we have then a V7 chord, there is an option to potentially double the root, so we can have root, root, third, seventh, because with the root being on the bottom of the chord, it creates a strong, stable sound, and therefore there can be a little bit of flexibility. But now that we are going to be using inversions, such as V6-5, V4-3, or V4-2, there are certain functions of the notes that occur above the bass note of these inversions that require the dominant seventh chord to be spelled with each of the notes without any doubling, such as root, third, fifth, seventh. Now, something that's interesting to note with each of these examples, which can be found in this chapter on page 95, please note how each of these examples show an arrow where the seventh resolves down by step. Each of these examples are important to mention because since we have the root, third, fifth, and seventh all spelled, the resolution of each of these notes does need to be adhered to or followed. When we have V6-5 going to 1, in this case, the third rises up to the tonic in the bass, and then the seventh resolves down. This helps to alleviate the sound of a tritone, which sounds kind of dissonant, moving to a third, or in this case it's a compound third, between the bass and the soprano. Sometimes we can have this resolution where the seventh is in the middle of the chord. You can still hear that dissonant sound, but then a consonant sound occurs after. In a minor key, that sound is also prevalent. When we have the V4-2, there's also a dissonant sound, which is then resolved when we go to 1-6, where in this case, the seventh, which is the lowest note of this inversion, V4-2, resolves down to 1-6. Now in each of these instances here, there is smooth bass movement as we lead toward the cadence from V, whichever inversion we use, to 1. Sometimes we can approach the inversion of the dominant seventh chord by leap, skip, or step. And at the same time, even though we might approach by leap like we see here, we can also approach by skip like we see here, or we can approach by step like we see here, or even sometimes with a repeated note. There is always going to be a smooth voice leading option, especially with the bass note, because the resolution does call for a resolution by stepwise motion. As we know, there are some common tones between the 2 chord and the 4 chord in relation to the 5 chord. If we are in the key of C major, the 4 chord would be spelled as F, A, C. And then the 5-7 chord would be spelled G, B, D, F. So of course, in this case, between the 4 chord and the 5-7 chord, the F is the same. And you can play you can have common tones or notes that are similar. When we have the 2 chord, D, F, A, going to the 5-7 chord, G, B, D, F, there are actually 2 notes that are the same between the 2 chord and the 5-7 chord. So there is option in this case as well for some common tone possibilities. So those are 2, I think, very helpful options and details that will help when approaching the 5-7 chord. You always want to think about stepwise motion as we resolve the different inversions of the dominant 7th chord, but also please keep in mind that depending on the use of the 2 chord, supertonic, or the subdominant chord, which is the 4 chord, as the use of the predominant chord, so the chord that happens right before the secondary, before the inversion of the dominant 7th, it's important to know that there might be a skip or a small leap, but it is resolved then by step, so that there is a smooth resolution of the 5-7 and its inversions. I do hope that this video was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you for the next one. Thank you so much, and take care.